My name is Hillary Davis. I'm the Advocacy and Organizing Director here at the Student Press Law Center. Before we get started, I want to thank just a few people for their work on tonight's event. Danielle Dietrich, who's our digital strategist and coordinator of all the things Student Press Freedom Day, and Dan Formansky, our amazing consultant, as well as Andrew Benson, our communications and outreach officer. I'm also joined tonight by Cade Spencer, who is a former officer with New Voices Texas, a former New Voices student leader, and one of our Student Press Freedom Day student co-chairs. I also want to take a quick second to shout out all the New Voices student leaders for 2021, 2022, who I do see in the participant list. I'm super excited to see you guys. And hopefully you will pitch in on some parts of this conversation because you know a ton. I also want to welcome a few others, Lynette Clementson, who's a board member with the Splc, and I'm sure we will have other guests who are trickling in shortly. So about the Splc, founded in 1974, Splc works to support, promote, and defend the First Amendment rights of student journalists and the advisors who support them. We do that in three core ways. Through our free legal hotline, where you can meet with an Splc attorney to talk about legal issues for your publication. That's anything ranging from media law questions like copyright or libel issues, to if your student press rights are violated through censorship or other means. The second core piece of our work is in organizing and supporting the New Voices movement, which is a grassroots, nonpartisan, student-driven legislative initiative to restore student press freedom protections at the state level. There are New Voices campaigns throughout the country, and we hope you will get involved. The third core piece is our work is training, education, and outreach. Zooming into classrooms through our Splc in the Classroom program, providing workshops at journalism conventions, and providing excellent legal resources and explainers for student journalists on the law of the student press. And another part of that work is to tell the world the story of student journalism, which brings us to Student Press Freedom Day, which is part of why you're all here today. This is the fourth annual Student Press Freedom Day. Student Press Freedom Day was created by the Student Press Law Center in 2019 with the goals of raising awareness of the vital work and impact of student journalists as you report on your schools and communities, highlighting the challenges student journalists face as you are confronted with censorship and prior review policies, and empowering student journalists in protecting and restoring their First Amendment freedoms. The theme for Student Press Freedom Day 2022 is Unmute Yourself. We want to focus attention on student journalists' right to publish truthfully without inhibition, to tell the stories most important to their communities free from censorship and from self-censorship. Along those lines, remember how I mentioned that free legal hotline? We're here for you at splc.org/legal request to help if you think your student press rights are being violated in any way. We are free, we are confidential. Please call us. Student press freedom isn't just a student issue or a youth issue or a journalist issue. This is a democracy issue. It's an issue about being able to tell the truth, to hold people in power like school officials accountable, and to give everyday people a voice, and ensuring that we can protect and expand student press freedom isn't just an issue, it's an ongoing campaign, one that we will talk about a lot in a little bit and why you are all here tonight. This year, we've launched the Student Press Freedom Day Bootcamp, which is a series of 4 skills-building Zoom workshops to help student journalists develop important skills to report on and advocate for student press freedom. Students and advisors who participate in the 4 central training workshops will receive a certificate and a LinkedIn badge. Tonight's training is the second in the series. 2 weeks ago, we held an op-ed writing crash course, which you can access online. If you want to get the certificate, you have to make sure to engage with all of the workshops and fill out the survey that will come to you after this training. And we hope everyone will fill out the survey so we can keep improving our programming for you. Next up on February 3rd, we'll be hosting a training on how to tell your story and be a spokesperson for student press freedom. That training in particular is a really excellent companion for tonight's workshop because it's all about how you can tell your story. You are really trained as journalists not to be the story, but when it comes to advocating for student press freedom, you have to be the story. You have to tell your story. This workshop will give you the tools to do that, and it'll feature some words from Kathy Kallmeyer, who some of you may know from Hazelwood versus Kallmeyer. On Thursday, February 10th, we'll be hosting a training on using social media as a journalist, as an advocate. All of our trainings are at 8 p.m. Eastern time. You can get all of this information at studentpressfreedom.org. If you haven't signed up for the other trainings, I encourage you to visit the website and do so today, and think about doing all of them as a boot camp, earning the certificate, and getting a LinkedIn badge. One other way you can get involved right now that'll really make a difference is to take the survey as to whether or not you've ever experienced censorship or self-censorship. We cannot tell you how valuable this information is to the Student Press Law Center in being able to advocate on your behalf. And finally, our Unmute Yourself photo contest is open now. So think about what you will send in to show us how awesome student journalists are. You can win cash prizes. And Dan is putting links in the chat to learn more. A few quick tech instructions. This is being recorded. Please feel free to use the chat during the presentation. I may miss things, but Dan and Danielle are keeping track of everything. You are muted for this call, and we're going to use the chat function. I do want this to be a conversation and not just me talking at you about advocacy, because as you'll learn, that's terrible for student press freedom if I just talk about it and don't let you guys engage. So please feel free to ask your questions as we go. I want to keep this open. This is for all of you to be here and to talk about what you want to talk about. So on that sort of note, just by a quick either show of hands or putting an exclamation point or something like that in the chat, how many of you know, very basic, how a bill becomes a law in your state legislature, not in the Congress? Awesome. Okay. If you don't, that's okay. Basic, but yes, that is all you need to know. It's fine. That's all you need to know. All right. We're going to cover a little bit about it today, and we're just going to run through it real quickly because, many of you know the basics of it, and many of you might need a little bit more. Second question. So take a second, think about this, but put in the chat for me, what does advocacy look like for you? And what do you want to advocate for in regard to the student press? That can be you want a state law. That can be you just want to advocate with your administration about more freedoms. You want to know basic things. Whatever the advocacy looks like for you, what you're interested in learning about here today. International students' rights, advocacy at the school level, new voices legislation. Anybody else? Anything else that you're interested in advocating for? More acceptance to publish stories at public schools, digital platforms, copyright laws, very cool. Students' rights at school level, economic transition and research. All right, we've got a good crop of stuff that you are interested in. So I'm going to be talking pretty heavily about new voices and also a few other laws that or bills that you should know about that are coming up. But advocacy on one thing and at one level is applicable to advocacy on all things and at all levels, right? The basic advocacy skills will serve you at the school level, at the local level, at the federal level. It's all the same tools from the same toolkit. And so we will talk a lot about stuff that maybe is not what you're thinking about in terms of advocacy, but it will absolutely help you. Okay, so very quickly, I've mentioned that I don't want this to be me sort of PowerPointing at you for this whole time, and we're not going to do that, but I do want to think a little bit. If I can share my screen. Actually, Danielle, can I? Yes, I can. Never mind. All right, so as I mentioned, the real quick rundown of how a bill becomes a law, and it looks like this. It's a very basic flow chart. Somebody has an idea, somebody puts in a piece of legislation, it goes through the two chambers, unless you're Nebraska, which is a unicameral legislature, goes through committees, it goes to a floor, everybody passes it, switches sides, everybody passes it again, bang, bang, boom, you have a law, right? It's very simple, except for the fact that it's really not, because there's a lot of people whose voices want to be heard. There's a lot of people who want to be part of the conversation, and there's a lot of people who want to change the bill to make it be the way that they want it to be. And so there's a lot of different avenues in which things can go really, really right and things can go really, really wrong. And advocacy is important at every single part of this process. But I'm wondering, for all of you who have a basic understanding of sort of how a bill becomes a law, what do you think is the most important part of that process? Where do you think your advocacy has the most sway? While you're thinking about it, Kay, do you want to weigh in here? Where do you think your advocacy has the most sway?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say your advocacy probably has the most sway right in your initial interactions with your bill supporter and the person that like adopts your bill and brings it to the House or Senate. That's really when you can look at wording, getting the specific wording you like, and making sure that as it goes forward, the bill is in the best way that you want it to be. That's when you have the most direct advocacy with representative. From then on, it's really about just flooding with information, with stories, and hoping that your bill supporter can help you get to the rest of the process.
Yeah, finding the right bill sponsor is certainly, it's certainly key, as many of us who've been doing this for a while have learned. I can tell you, having been a lobbyist for almost a decade, I can tell you with absolute certainty that absolutely nobody has a clue how to actually win an advocacy campaign. Nobody actually knows when the right moment is that your voice matters the most and when is most important for you to be involved. There are absolutely certain things, like Kate mentioned, having the right sponsor that can make or break, well, not make or break, but make things a lot easier or a lot harder. But where in the process you get involved, it doesn't actually matter that much as long as you get involved. You know, we can talk a lot about it later in terms of, you know, creating your coalition and getting started, but the simple fact is that you need one voice, you have one voice, and then we can snowball it from there. The only thing that I know is that advocacy does not succeed when the voices of people who are most affected by an issue are not represented. And so, as I say to everybody, I've said this to many of you on this call before, I can walk into a room full of legislators who really like students, who really like press freedom, who might even really like student press freedom. And I can walk in and give them the absolute most compelling argument ever about why they should be supporting student press freedom and passing a law to restore and protect it. And the very first thing that any legislator will say to me is, okay, where are the students? If they don't care, why do I care? I cannot do that without students behind me. They really only want to hear from you. They really only need to hear from you. New Voices is really a student-centered and student-powered movement. And I want to give you a couple of examples of when student voice has really turned the tide in ways that were unexpected. Over the past couple of years that I've worked with students, I've seen a few really interesting and compelling moments in campaigns. Cade's going to talk a lot about New Voices Texas and what they do. They have a particular challenge because their legislature only meets every 2 years. And by that, I mean every other year. So there's a whole year of dead space in there where they've got to get really creative about how to keep people involved, how to keep student voices at the forefront, and how to keep people thinking about student press freedom. New Voices Texas does incredible work, and Cade will talk a lot about that. I know that New Voices in Nebraska has worked really hard on letter writing campaigns in the past and postcard campaigns, which have had a lot of really interesting impact there as well. Yesterday in New York, I don't know, Mike Simmons, if your class is on, but yesterday in New York, there were just a couple of students who spent quite a bit of time phone banking and talked to 25 assistants, 4 legislative directors, and left 11 voicemails. It didn't take as long as you might think. And I can promise you that none of those legislators leapt through the phone and screamed at them about this. They really wanted to hear from students. And in fact, the feedback seems to be that a lot of legislators had never thought about this before and had their minds really swayed in a positive direction and really want to be supportive of New Voices in New York. And that's a really incredible achievement for them, and we should be really excited for them. And the last one I want to highlight is, last year in New Jersey, a few students got a little bit tired of the fact that the New Jersey House wouldn't hold a hearing on their New Voices bill. It had been 6 years. It had passed the Senate unanimously twice, and the House committee just wouldn't hold a hearing. So I think the day before Student Press Freedom Day last year, these 3 or 4 students got together and they held effectively their own hearing. They had a public forum on Zoom where they just invited a whole lot of people to come talk about student press freedom, and they invited legislators. And it was about a week or 2 later that suddenly there was a hearing, a vote, a unanimous vote. It went to the floor. It became law. At any point in that process, any one of these students could have said, I don't want to do this. This is a lot. This is hard. It's scary. And it might have been fine. People might have picked up the mantle. New Jersey advocated for 6 years before these students got here. And without the 6 years that came before, that one moment would not have been the tipping point. But the reality is that without those students available at that moment in that time, ready to do that work, we wouldn't have a law today. And that's true for every single state that we're going to talk about. The key here is that your voices needed to be front and center. So New Voices advocacy, how many of you are familiar with what New Voices is? Can you just, again, an exclamation point or something in the chat to let me know if you know what New Voices is? Nikia, Hannah, Emmy, I hope you guys know what New Voices is. I know you know what New Voices is. Great. So for those of you who don't know, New Voices is a state-based campaign to restore and protect student press freedom at the state level. It's basic, it's simple. We go state by state and we're putting in laws that say school administrators cannot censor student journalists except in very, very specific reasons, libel, slander, unwarranted invasion of privacy, that kind of thing. It protects advisors who are penalized or otherwise pressured to illegally censor their students, and it makes sure that there is a model policy and all of that in play and in place. That's really where Splc's advocacy has been over the past couple of years, but that is going to change a little bit, and we're going to talk in a second about why that is. But there's also a ton of other ways to protect student press freedom. So maybe the issue for you in your state or your area is that there's no law protecting student press freedom. Maybe the problem is that there's a weak law that's protecting student press freedom. It doesn't go far enough. There are gaps. Maybe the problem is that there's a bill in your state legislature that's going to restrict what can be discussed in school materials, and it's broad enough to mean that it covers the student newspaper. And spoiler alert, that's happening a lot right now. A lot of these anti-critical race theory bills, a lot of these divisive concepts bills extend to the student media. and may really, really limit what you can say. Maybe the problem in your state is that you have student media policies that conflict with the law or are insufficient. Maybe the problem is you go to a private school or have other administration that's hostile to student press freedom. All of these are valid student press freedom issues. All of these are things that our advocacy tools can help you with. And all of these things are things that SPLC and our legal team can help you with as well. If you live in a state that is currently green on the map, congratulations. You live in a state with a New Voices law, and your student press freedom is protected by law to some extent, if not perfect. If you live in a state that is pink or blue, you live in a state that has an extraordinarily active New Voices campaign that either has legislation introduced this year, that's the blues, or is ready to introduce legislation, either this year or next, but is very close. If you live in a state that is extraordinarily obnoxiously orange right now, congratulations, you live in a state where there is some sort of New Voices or student press freedom advocacy that you can and should be thinking about. And you know what that is more than I would know what that is at this point. So I want to share with you a tool that we're going to reference a little bit here. And this is our advocacy guide. Give me 1 second. Excuse the Google Docs link. This is a 50-state advocacy guide that will have for you some of the top things that we are recommending that you do in your state. You can take a look at it in a second. We're going to reference it a lot. It's a live document. We're going to be going back and forth to it throughout the next few weeks between now and Student Press Freedom Day. And it gives you a few ideas as to what you can really advocate for once we get to the end of this evening. But first, I really want to turn it over to Cade so that he can talk a little bit about his experience as a student advocate. Cade, if you can kind of walk us through what it was like for you, what you did, what you liked, some of the challenges, and what you found to be some of the most useful tools and things for you in your advocacy, I think that would be great for everybody.
Perfect. Thank you, Hillary. Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a good night. I'm really excited to be here with you today. As Hillary said, my name is Cade. I am a current freshman at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., studying political science and English literature. And I'm originally from Austin, Texas. I don't know if anyone else is from Texas here, but that's where I'm from. I was heavily involved in New Voices Texas there, and I'm going to actually drop a link in the chat to our website, which I think it's a really cool site. I'm proud of it. We did a lot of good work there. We have some cool educational materials that you're welcome to look at, use information from. Yeah, we're all in New Voices. We're all about sharing and talking to other states and just making sure we're all helping the New Voices community at large. So first, I'm going to talk about kind of my journey with student journalism. As I'm sure a lot of you are, I was heavily involved in student journalism in high school all 4 years. I wrote for the Dispatch in James Bowie High School. Loved it. We had a broadsheet paper and an online publication. It was great. I really loved it. I wrote news a lot. So, a lot of sometimes like harder hitting topics. And other times there was an article about when we had a student go to like elementary school, like in a mentor program, and she did the Heimlich on a kid there. So a lot of different variety of stories, some really good investigative journalism, just overall had a lot of fun with that. So I loved journalism. And then junior year, my actual editor-in-chief ahead of me in my publication was involved with New Voices. And she was like, "Hey, this is something you get involved in." So I did, and here I am. I really liked New Voices and its message, and I thought student journalism was really powerful, especially in the time of COVID-19, as we're still in, but we've been in for a while. And that was kind of at my peak student journalism career in high school. We covered a lot of COVID-19 content, what was happening behind the scenes in school, and we were really the eyes and ears for parents, for the community members in that time. And so we really took on a really important role there. And that was really cool to see the impact student journalism could have, especially when sometimes community members don't have that insight on what's going down in school, especially when students are away from the actual school building. So that was a really important work, and I'm really glad we got to do that. And it inspired me even more to work for Student Press Freedom. So as Lily said, I was involved in the 2020, I believe, New Voices Summer Leaders Institute, which is really cool. It sounds like some of y'all here were involved in that. I thought that was awesome. We learned about the story of self, what it means to be an advocate. We focused a lot on developing social media. You can follow us at New Voices Texas on Instagram. And there's also type in New Voices and you'll see a bunch of different states. And as you'll see, I'm in my college dorm right now. So if anyone's interested in what a college dorm looks like, this is it. There's a sink, a bed, that's pretty much it. Anyways, so Summer Institute. Summer Institute was really my introduction into advocacy, what it meant to be an advocate. Again, I did a lot of my work during the time of COVID-19. So a lot of our advocacy is going to be online, virtual, which is kind of rare. And so after going to the Summer Institute, I stepped into my official leadership role with New Voices Texas. So New Voices Texas had an association of students with an adult leader, and we were the ones kind of really pushing advocacy. So I sat on the board there, and we had a ton of students under us who were volunteers and really helping our mission go through. And that was really cool. Probably my favorite skill that I got from the Summer Institute was just logistical knowledge. All the resources the SPLC has put in the chat, guys, I highly recommend you use them. The SPLC is a great resource. I mean, they're incredible, and they really are there to help you, and they're so passionate about it. So really reach out. The form that Hillary just shared, which is the form with all the states and some information, super helpful. Look at your own state there, and look at other states too. What's going down in other states? It's great. Remember, New Voices is a national movement. Sometimes, I'd get stuck in New Voices, Texas, and only think there, but there are other states out there with such great ideas. And that's something I really liked about the Summer Institute. We all got together and talked about what our ideas were. And so, for example, some of our educational material on our websites, which we created, is influenced a lot by educational material other states had made. We're sharing, we're uplifting. And so there are some group chats. If you go to the Summer Institute, there's also some forums online about New Voices. Join them, DM New Voices States, DM your state coalition. That's a great way to just make connections. You'll find a lot of advocacy is making connections, both with other advocates and with legislators. So I talked about that. That was my journey coming to New Voices. I was a student journalist, loved it, thought it was powerful. It was like all student journalists should be able to do student journalism as they see fit in real impactful ways. And beyond even just student journalism, the student journalism I did in high school, I was lucky enough to not experience censorship in my high school, has really just set me up to be a great college student, a great individual, a great member of society. It's given me skills on how I can find truth, how to tell what truth is, how to talk about difficult issues. I mean, those are skills, how to really look at something critically. And student journalism sets you up to be, whether you go into journalism or not, it sets you up to be just a productive member of your community. So that's great. So I just wanted to uplift those skills. And now I'm so blessed to be a co-chair, and I'm excited to be here tonight. So let's talk about the actual advocacy work I did in Texas. So as I said, I started advocacy really pretty much my junior year after the summer of training with the SPLC, and I did it through the end of my senior year. So about a year and a half, I'd say. It was really great. In Texas, as Hillary said, we have a biannual legislator. So that meant I had a year with them, and then obviously, so I think it was, 2021 was the year of our legislative session. So last year, of course, that was not only COVID, but if any of you were aware, Texas also had a winter storm, which happened in February at the beginning of the year. And that filled a lot of legislative policies that year. So advocacy is really hard. However, we still got a lot done, and that is what is exciting. As Hillary said, every inch forward is an inch forward, and the years of progress before us really set us up for success. And I am proud. We did not get the bill passed, but I'm proud to know of the blocks I set down for future New Voices leaders to come and act upon. So let's talk about what blocks did we do. So looking at a legislative session, the first thing you want to do is just kind of understand what your goals are. As Hillary said, there's multiple approaches to protecting free speech you can do. For us, we wanted a bill. And that's what we wanted for Texas, and that was kind of our vision. So Texas, obviously, as most states, has a House of Representatives and a Senate. And so if you want a bill, first you have to make the bill. I was lucky enough to already have the bill written by past SBL teams. Again, That's exactly why, working for years, the bill gets written. We see what works, what doesn't, and it just really sets you up for success. So we had a bill ready to go. We even actually had a bill sponsor in the House of Representatives, which is great. And that is so cool. It is really cool to work with a bill sponsor. That is something that's been set up by past groups. Basically, what a bill sponsor is, for those that don't know, is there's someone has to introduce your bill into the House of Representatives or Senate. So it's really, you can't really just submit it and go, okay, now everyone talk about this. You have to get a legislator that's currently in there to sign off and support it, kind of bring it to their peers and go, hey guys, this is a bill that's important. We need to talk about this. That's really what gets it moving on the train. So we had that in the House of Representatives. Unfortunately, we were not able to get it in the Senate. However, we spent a lot of great time that year advocating in the Senate. We went to meetings with legislators, and they are, I think, on the brink of getting a bill sponsor soon. As Hillary said, there's a year off. So this entire 2022, there will not be a single bill passed in Texas, unless there's like a special session or something. So, but that also is a whole year for us to do advocacy work. And honestly, with the winter storm and COVID, it might be better that we have a year to build a foundation even more. So we had a sponsor in the House of Representatives, and that's really where we did most of our work around. We met with her several times, and it's cool, y'all, to meet with a legislator, and they'll take a screenshot of your Zoom, put on Twitter, and be like, met with great students today. That's cool to get on Twitter with an official legislator, verified track. But legislators love students. They really do. So if you're ever doing advocacy work, you are a student, and capitalize it, bold it, just throw it out there. Always say you're a student journalist. They love supporting students. They really do. Especially when you talk about student journalism, what it can prepare you to be a real journalist, doing impactful work, and just how it can help you in your general life. They'll love that, and because it's true, and they can't argue with the facts. So that's kind of the message we brought to our bill sponsor. We talked to her about, we're student journalists, why we love student journalism. Get as many student journalists involved as you can. Talk to your publications, talk to publications at neighboring schools. We were lucky to have an advisor at my publication that I wrote for that was also loved New Voices and was heavily kind of intertwined with the whole Texas journalism clique. And so he was able to reach out to other advisors. We had interconnections. That was great. And we had people on the New Voices board from several areas of Texas. So we kind of had a good scope across the state. So I guess if I was going to give 3 points of advice, just to kind of make my speech more succinct, the first one is know how a bill passes in your state. That's so important. Get that logistical knowledge and set a goal. Set a short-term goal. Say, hey, in this, I am a senior, and in my senior year of high school, I want to get a sponsor in the Senate. I want to get a bill finalized. I want to set a tangible goal for that year. And you can totally go over the goal. That's why I'm saying also set a big goal. I want the bill passed, but set a little step you can do so that when you finish, you can be proud and go, look what we did. And the next people can work off that, or you can always return and work on it too. So understand your system, and Splc is a great resource helping you understand it. Can't recommend them enough. If any of y'all are going for the certificate with these trainings, stick with that. That'll be a great tool to have. And, to maybe even help with your advocacy, just gives you a little more ethos. Secondly, so first, know your system, build a plan. Secondly, get supporters. They love students, and they love to have more and more and more students. Just flood their emails, flood court hearings, virtual, or if they happen to be in person, just flood it with students. As Hillary said, they need to hear from the people being affected. If you have a school district that has students that have actually experienced censorship, really uplift them as well. Of course, if they feel comfortable and all of that, but those stories are really ones that need to be heard. But also why you love student journalism. That's really powerful and can have a lot of truth in it. So again, know your logistics, build a plan. Second, build a support system and students that will really help uplift their voices. Whether students are writing emails, letters, whatever it may be, have them share their voice. Even if they're just sharing an article they love, and you can bring it to the court hearing and lay out 50 articles that student journalists wrote and loved. So that shows a lot of power there, and people can see that this is an issue people care about. But you don't have to just think about student journalists. There are so many people in schools that do expression, written expression, artistic expression, that will care about your issue. Think people in theater, think people in band, think people in writing clubs, think just general students that can also care about your issue, and they can write in, say, hey, I'm not a student journalist, but this is an issue I really care about. That goes a long way too. They can see it's a whole community focus. And third, what would my third be? My third is set up consistent communication. This is both with the volunteers you've gotten, make sure you're communicating with them, but also advocacy is about consistency. And as Hillary said, you never know when the statement you say is the right one or will be the tipping point. You don't, but that's why you got to be consistent the whole way, from day one to day you step out. Consistency means, post on your social media. That's consistency. Tag representatives, retweet what representatives that support you say. We really love social media. It was a great tool. Have fun with it. Twitter is a great tool. Facebook is great for representatives, Facebook and Twitter. A lot of representatives aren't going to follow you on Instagram or TikTok, but they will Twitter it up, and you can tag them. They love to have students on their feed. So just be consistent. That means sending emails, sending messages to your representatives that you've communicated with. Show them that you care about this issue and you're willing to go forward with it. Even for us, I think, so those are my three things. Know your logistics, have a plan, short-term or long-term, build a community, and third, be consistent, get your message out there. But probably my favorite thing I did when I was advocate, and this is how it ends, is we had a really cool opportunity. Our biggest kind of opponents in Texas were the Association of School Boards. So kind of your top school administrators. Those are the people that are kind of like, against it, actually signed in the past against us, which is bad. Students have a lot of power, but legislators get suspicious when the school board association is signing against us. So we realized that, and instead of kind of shoving it under the rug, we kind of met it head on, and we actually set up meetings with the school board association for the first time, like representatives from them, and we had consistent meetings, and that was great. It was empowering. They got to see real students, and I think we kind of started to change their mind when they actually met with real students and saw real work and what we really wanted to do. That's powerful, and they show that people care about the issue. So if you ever have a chance like that to meet with someone that maybe isn't necessarily supporting your cause, do it. Come with kindness, come with excitement, come with passion. It can go a long way. So yeah, again, I'm Cade. I'm so excited to be here. That's kind of a little overview of the work I did, and I'm happy to answer any questions y'all have. Thank you.
Cade, thank you so much for that and for all your work. I love having Cade here, and really a lot of the student leaders, but Cade in particular. Every time you come and you talk, I always get a little new nugget from you that inspires me back. And I think both Dan and I would agree that advocacy is about consistency. That is top level understanding of what advocacy is. It is showing up time and again, showing people that you're not going away. And that is true if it's a legislator, that is true if it's a school administrator, that is true if it is your neighbor who is driving you crazy with their music. Just consistently showing up respectfully, but letting them know you're not going away, you're not leaving. That's what gets it done. I say very often that bills aren't won or lost. It's just that they got us to go away for a while, right? And they do that by kind of wearing you out over time. But if you continue to show up in any small fashion, you are always getting yourself closer to that finish line. As long as you have improved a little bit over where you were before, you're getting there. And New Voices Texas knows that, I think, more than a lot of people, because they have that gap here. And I really encourage everybody who's interested in advocacy to check out some of what they do, what New Voices New York does, what New Voices Virginia does. There's a lot of different New Voices groups who are all on social media in various places, and you can really learn a ton from them, more than I can tell you in the 20 minutes that we have together. Julia, you mentioned that reps are more likely to be on Facebook and Twitter than a consistent Instagram presence. That is absolutely true. They use Instagram and Twitter a lot because they're voting constituents use use Facebook and Twitter a lot. So that's kind of where they are. There are 1,000 different advocacy tools that we could teach you. We can't teach you all in one night. As anybody who's gone through the Student Leaders Institute knows, we can't teach them to you all in a week. The absolute best way to learn advocacy is to do advocacy, to face these moments, to have your creative ideas to go forward. And so to that end, you know, there's a limit to how much we're going to be able to impart with you tonight, but I do want to kind of walk you through a few things that are in the state-by-state guide, and then we're going to do one concrete thing. If you have questions or things you want to make sure that we particularly cover tonight, please go ahead and put them in the chat. From here on out, we're free-forming and discussing the things that you want to discuss. Many of you are here because you have either already got an interest in advocacy, you've done all the Googling, I don't need to tell you some of this basic stuff, or you've already done some advocacy. And so if you want to level any of that up, let's talk about that in the chat. But if you go back to the 50 state guide again, a few things I want to bring your attention to. First, if you are in a state that does not have a New Voices bill already, that's fine. We have a model bill, so you don't even have to write anything. The days of having to write your own legislation are over. We have a model bill, and we will work with you on customizing it for your state if that's what you want to do. If you don't have anybody who's put in a bill already, then I would encourage you to reach out to your individual legislator. It's very helpful very often with legislators if you are their constituent, you get to the top of their attention list if you're their constituent. You can reach out to other legislators, and there's good reason to do so. But if they have to answer to somebody who lives in their district, they're much more likely to pay attention to you and to what you're saying. If they aren't the right person for the gig, they'll tell you. And sometimes if you ask them to point you to somebody else, they'll do so. And so starting there is key. But you can take that model bill and go straight to a legislator and just say, I really want this to be law in our state. It's law in 15 states already. Let's get this going here. Unless you think that one student is not enough to start a New Voices chapter, I promise you, you're wrong. Many, 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 many single students have come to us in the past year particularly, and have really gotten some traction. Keep your eye on Tennessee and Oklahoma, and those were both one student who came forward and said, I'm interested in doing this. So that's if you live in a state that has no bill, that has no campaign that we know of. If there's a New Voices campaign in your state, the information on how to contact them is there. I certainly encourage you to reach out to the email versus just connecting with them on social, because there may be just more to do than what's available on social. And so certainly reach out and let them know that you are interested in getting involved. We've also got all sorts of scripts and yada, yada. We're going to get into talking to your legislator in one second, but I do want to highlight two things that are not legislative, but are huge advocacy and things that are very easy for students to do, and also things that only students can do. The first is that if you are a private school student, very often you're not covered by New Voices legislation or a lot of legislation dealing with education. And that's because legislators are really hesitant to tell private schools what to do. They're private for a reason, right? They're non-public schools, and so legislators don't like to get involved with that. But the Private School Journalism Association is going to be rolling out some guidelines and a model here in the next few weeks as we ramp up to Student Press Freedom Day that is based on New Voices and effectively helps to get New Voices protections into private schools. So it's a policy for your school to go ahead and show their commitment to student press freedom, and certainly to start a dialogue. even if you think that your school is a non-starter in terms of student press freedom, you think it won't happen, consider having that conversation with your school administrators anyway. One, because you may be surprised. They may just not have thought about what student media is. They're not paying a whole lot of attention to you. And just opening up that dialogue may actually help to loosen things up a little bit. One thing that is really key that we see time and again is that the people who are decision makers, they didn't think about student media when they were students very often. They're definitely not thinking of it now that they are 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years out of high school. They have no idea what you want to write about. They have no idea what you are writing about. They have stereotypes and fears in their head. And when you bring them into the fold and really talk to them about what's happening in your newsrooms, you would be surprised as to how often they do sort of loosen up and understand that you do deserve press freedoms, that you're not scary, and that there's a ton to work with. So PSJA will be working on some new voices-esque protections for private schools. We can advocate for private schools to be included in new voices protections. We just also recognize that that is sometimes an uphill battle, although not an insurmountable one. I know Rhode Island has protections for private schools, and I believe one or two others do as well. The other thing that I want to bring your attention to is getting your school district's model policy. This is a very overlooked part of advocacy, but one that is super important and crucial. Even if your state hasn't passed new voices protections, some school districts actually have policies which are more protective of student press than maybe your average student journalist knows, or maybe even that your administrator is aware of. Getting a copy of your school district's policy on student media or student-free expression can be a really helpful way of loosening things up as well. One, because it lets you know if they don't have one, which they should, or two, if it conflicts with the law, if you're in a state that has a new voices law, that's really helpful for us to know. And sometimes getting your school district to ease up is a little easier than going all the way up to the state legislative level as well. It's certainly less intimidating. They're very often people who know you and have watched you grow up since you were in kindergarten, and maybe a little bit more amenable to listening to what you're talking about. And so that is something to consider as well. Those policies are public records. They are available to you. If you have a hard time getting them, people are resistant, or the policy you see conflicts with the law, as far as you know, contact SPLC. We can help you with that and with getting things through that. So as time is rapidly running, there's a little thing I want to have you guys do here. And I would like everybody to take an opportunity, and that includes everybody who already knows their legislators, to click on this link. It's openstates.org, and this will help you to find your legislator and their contact information. So if you click on that link, you go there and you enter your address. For those of you who are in college, you can enter both your home address and your college address, because technically both people should listen to you. Go ahead and put in your information, and it's going to help you bring up all of the information of your legislators. If Open States doesn't work for you for whatever reason, your state legislative webpage also generally has a Find Your Legislator tool, but this is just an easy way for all of us to see it at the same time. So this will bring up the people who represent you locally. What we're talking about here is state representatives, state senators, state delegates, that kind of thing. If it gives you the option, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, go ahead and open your delegate, senator, whatever's website. Pick up your phone, add a contact, and put them in your phone. Let's just take a second right now. I shockingly have not done this, and my state delegate is about to be so excited that I'm doing this right now. But take a second to put them in your phone. You're a lot more likely to contact your legislator in a moment where something is really, really pressing on your mind. And once it's in your phone, if you have had a particularly tough day with your administrator and you want your legislator to know why they should have student press freedom in your state, they're there and they're ready to go. There's no excuse not to have it at any given point. You don't know how you feel about adding them to your contacts, put them in under an alias. Nobody's going to see what you call them. It's totally fine. We've all, got people we wouldn't like to have in our contacts, but this one will work for you in the long run. Because at some point, you're going to need to contact your legislator, no matter who they are. At some point, something is going to need their attention. For some of you, there's also an email address. I would encourage you right now, in our final sort of few minutes, to open up your email. Open an email. If you're in Gmail, you can schedule send for much, much later. You can schedule send for 5 years from now if you feel like it. Put their information in there and start a draft. And then start writing down in that email why student press freedom matters to you. The only thing that a legislator needs to hear from you is your name, that you are a student journalist, that you would like to see student press freedom protections in your state, and thank you. That's all they need to know. Anything beyond that is amazing, is gravy, is wonderful. If you are concerned that you don't have the perfect censorship story, that you are not the model student journalist that they need to hear from, I promise you, there is not a model student journalist who they need to hear from. Some of the most effective, strongest new voices advocates that we have are students who have never once been censored, because they know what they are capable of writing when nobody stops them. That is a powerful message for your legislators to hear, sometimes even more powerful than hearing your censorship story. If they can hear what you've been able to write, what the impact was on your school, what you've been able to do, and if you are able to ask them, why is it that not everybody else has that opportunity? That's extraordinarily powerful. Go ahead and take a few minutes. It can be right now. It can be in the 5 minutes after you get off this Zoom. Write it out in a Google Doc or in your email. And then think about if you want to send it or not. You don't have to. If you have a bill number, it's always really helpful to say, I would like this bill passed. Always put in the bill to restore and protect the freedom of student journalists, because they don't know their bill numbers. But go ahead and send that. Get it ready to send. When you come back and you listen next week about telling your story of self, you'll be able to flesh out a little bit more and get a little bit more comfortable with talking about yourself. But a legislator is not going to pass a bill that nobody contacts them about. One of the really interesting things that we heard last night coming out of New York was that one legislator said they'd been getting a ton of phone calls about it, and nobody knew that, because everybody thinks that they're the only person calling. And that's not going to be true, especially if you put on social media that you called, that you went ahead and you sent your email, especially if you get that out. We are all better at advocacy when we are a community and when we do this together. And so whatever we can do to make it public is always beneficial. That's why we have printable postcards that are in the advocacy guide. That's why, as Cade said, we try to talk among new voices advocates as much as possible. Talking about it is crucial to passing it. We've only got a few more minutes, and I just want to leave you guys with one thing. Prior to working at Splc, I was working as a lobbyist in Rhode Island, and I was very much in the free speech sphere. And I happened to be in the room one day in a hearing when a student came in with this bonkers story about how student journalists can be censored for virtually any reason. and I was in the free speech world, and I had no idea. I did not know Hazelwood. I did not know student censorship. I did not know that this was a problem, and neither did any of the legislators. And this one student, who had a couple of friends with her, came in with the proposal that there should be a new voices law, which at the time was law in 11 or 12 states, something like that. And just her voice and just her story was so surprising and caught the legislators so off guard, and they so heavily agreed with her, that the bill became law in 2 years. I want you to know that 2 years is rocket speed. It would have become law that year, except there was a dispute about chicken coops. I don't want to get into it. I'm still very upset about it, as everybody who's heard me tell this story before knows. But that's an astronomical pace for legislation. Legislation almost never becomes law in the first couple of years. But it was one student, who came in and got this done, and is very much the reason why I'm sitting having this conversation with you, because I so much remembered her that when I heard SPLC was looking for somebody to work with new voices, I was like, I got to do that, because there are these students out here who want to get their stories told. So this is the very beginning of advocacy for all of you. The advocacy guide is there. I am here. My email address is all over everything. SPLC is here. We are here to help you do whatever it is that you need to do to get this legislation passed. There are 1,000 other advocacy tools we haven't talked about: petitions, organizing, getting others on board. These are all conversations that we can have one-on-one as we go forward. But if you walk away with one thing from here, the most critical thing I want you to know is that the only thing that you need to walk into advocacy with is your name and your story. Anything outside of that is helpful. It is not necessary. You alone are sufficient and necessary for this gig. With that, if there's any last questions that anybody has, I really want to give an opportunity to anybody to ask them, because I know very many of you have them and have not. Kate, is there anything that I have missed that you think we need to be sure to cover as we head on out of this evening?
No, I loved what you said there. When I first started advocacy, guys, I was just a high school student, loved journalism going forward. And now I'm actually studying political science at a university. So I went in with no knowledge, but you will gain knowledge if you just consistent and stay in there, and you will do great work. So I'm excited for all of y'all. I wish you the best, and go get some new voices bills passed.
All right. Well, unless there is anything else, again, please, I'm going to actually just go ahead and put my email address here in the chat for anybody who needs it. Add me to your phone. It'll offset the other person you just added to your phone. It's all good. But thank you all very much for joining us. As we've mentioned, this event is part of a series leading up to Student Press Freedom Day. Head over to studentpressfreedom.org to explore our other programs and events. The Student Press Law Center is here to support you, the student journalists. If you have been censored, or if you have a feeling something just isn't right, you're not really sure, go to splc.org and click Get Legal Help at the top of our page. Fill out our legal hotline form or book a time to talk on the phone, and one of our legal experts will be in touch shortly to answer your questions and provide assistance. You can also find toolkits, presentations, frequently asked questions, and more at splc.org. If you haven't already, please sign up for our newsletter, follow us on social media. Those links, I believe, are in the chat. Thanks again for joining us in the spirit of Student Press Freedom. Everybody unmute yourself and say goodbye before you log off. Thank you so much for everybody, and have a good night.
Bye.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.